Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Ready for Capital. I'm Johan Matthews, one of your presenters today. I'm a member of the learning team here at the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast, or CFNE for short. I'm joined by Carolyn Etzelbetter, who will also be presenting a portion, and Joe Marafino, our New York State Loan and Outreach Officer, will be presenting a portion of today's workshop. We appreciate you guys for joining us. You can drop any comments you want along the presentation in the chat, and at the end, we'll get to questions. We're going to record this session, so if you have to drop off early or if you want to send it to a friend, you should have that link in a couple of weeks. And if you want to stay off camera, please feel free to stay off camera or make any necessary changes to your environment. So with that said, let's dive in. I'll introduce our host organization, the Cooperative Fund of the Northeast. For any of you who are not familiar, we were founded in 1975 as a nonprofit community development financial institution. And so that means we're about 50 years of providing co-op-friendly financial products, typically loans and services, such as what our learning team provides, including webinars like these, no-cost coaching opportunities for cooperatives and co-op curious entrepreneurs, and connections to the co-op ecosystem, right? Other service providers that might be helpful to you on your journey. And of course, we serve as an investment opportunity that promotes socially conscious enterprise. So regular folks like you or institutions can invest in this fund and help support a different way of doing business, a community-owned, a one that is focused on how people are at the center of business. So that's a little bit about the Cooperative Fund. As I mentioned, I'm a member of the learning team. There are 4 of us. We've got Carolyn on the call, myself. We also have 2 other colleagues, some of which may join us, Maggie and Carla. We provide no-cost coaching. We've done so for hundreds of co-ops and co-op curious entrepreneurs. And no matter your stage of growth, our team can help support you, identify next steps, and recognize what your options are for additional support. So if you're looking to get any coaching from us, you can go to our website, coopfund.coop/coaching. We also have our lending team. There are 5 loan officers scattered throughout the Northeast, New York, and New England. Today, we have Joe Marafino on the call representing New York State, but we've got lots of other great friendly folks for you guys to build a relationship with, depending on where you live, right? They serve not just as your lender, but as your partner in success. And if you want to get started with our loan process, you can go to our website, coopfund.coop/get loan with CFNE. So with that out of the way, let's dive into today's content. We should be together for 90 minutes. We're 10 minutes in, and that means we should be finishing around 1:30, give or take. We'll have some time for questions at the end. Hopefully we don't run over, but that would happen if it's getting really spicy and we're engaging in conversation. So, we're patient with that. We hope you are as well. So we're going to be looking at 3 particular questions today in this workshop. We're going to be asking, how do you know if you're ready for capital? What are the different sources of capital once I'm ready? And what are these capital providers looking for? That's what we're looking to cover in this session. If there are other questions you have, feel free to drop them in the chat. We might not get to them throughout the workshop, but perhaps we can explore it at the end or in a follow-up workshop. So be sure to comment or just ask any questions you have throughout the actual workshop session. So with that, I want to dive in to that first question. How do you know if you're ready for capital? Very big question. A lot of us, we're not sure. But I think before we even answer that question, we gotta have to ask ourselves, what do we mean when we say capital, right? It's not necessarily an everyday word, right? What is capital? So I want to invite you to take 10 seconds to think about it. How would you explain what capital is to a child? Okay, not just any child, a pretty smart child, 13-year-old, 14-year-old kid. What is capital? What would you tell them right there in 7th or 8th grade? Feel free to drop that in the chat. If you got a brilliant one, you can come off mute. What is capital? How would you explain it to a pretty smart 8th grader, 7th grader? Give you guys about 10 seconds. Yes, another 5 seconds for anyone who's hungry to get out there. We got money from Scott Shearer, all these dollar signs. Yep, that's definitely a part of it. Anyone else? Or is that capturing what most people think when they think of the term capital? All right, this is good. This is good because the kind of technical definition of capital would be the resources and assets used in the production of goods and services. So what do you actually need to make your businesses viable, to provide the product, whether they're hot dogs or the services, whether they're massages or anything else like that? What are the things, the resources and assets used in the production of goods and services? And there's actually multiple forms of capital, all of which eventually you might try to use money to access, right? First, in the world of cooperatives and community ownership, we've got social capital. We've got relationships among like-minded communities or like-the situated communities, right? We're all in a particular neighborhood in New York. We're all from a racial demographic. We're all from a gender demographic, maybe class or income, right? Relationships that bond people together. There's also relationships that bridge people who are not necessarily so closely connected, right? Relationships between communities at the institutions that might be in that city or town or different communities, right? How do you connect immigrant communities with indigenous communities? Things like that. What are the relationships, right? Eventually, you might want to purchase access to that, right? Whether it's through social media marketing, you're trying to get your message out to certain communities, right? Those relationships, that is as good as money or even more than money in a lot of cases. Next, we've got human capital, right? So this is thinking about the skills, the expertise, the experiences of those humans within that community, those sets of relationships, right? What are the actual knowledge and experiences that are coming to bear in the delivery of your good or of your service, right? As you create your co-op or your business and you provide your product or service, what are the skills and experiences needed from the people that are involved? We've got natural capital, you know, these are obviously the natural resources in the planet, in the world, in the earth, and are around us in the environment that we harness to make our products and services and deliver those products and services, right? Whether it's food or other minerals, what are we actually harvesting from Mother Earth to deliver our goods and services? We've also got business capital, right? This is kind of a broader one, but I think of this as um, I would say the professional service providers, right? A lot of us grew up in communities where we haven't seen someone start businesses. And when we want to start a business, we don't even have a lawyer friend, an accountant friend, someone in the insurance industry. We don't have the business service providers that are necessary, access to that. So that's a relationship, but it's also the necessary business resources in a community to support the start and growth of any enterprise, co-op or otherwise. And finally, what most of you are thinking of, that money, financial capital. And we can see again, you can use money to access legal expertise. You can use money to access the, chips or the particular food or animal products that goes into the food you serve, right? Or the human capital, those experiences, the labor pool that we hire from, and the relationships we need with our customer community and employment community, investor community, and so on and so forth. So there's different types of capital. A lot of us are thinking about financial capital. Let's dive into that, right? So if I'm thinking about, if I'm ready for this capital, these forms of capital are more relevant at different stages. So when you're at the beginning and you're looking at what is our mission, what are our goals, who are our cooperators, you're thinking about that who and what, that social capital. So you're asking yourself, who will you serve, right? Who is going to be the beneficiary of your product or service? In a co-op, We serve our members. Our members might be the individuals who purchase the service. You might be a food co-op. 1,000 of us own our own grocery store and we shop there. We're the ones we're serving, and maybe people in that broader community, right? What problem of theirs will your business address, right? So what is their problem? What knowledge and skills do you need to respond to their problem, right? You know, you want to serve your neighborhood. I live in Schenectady, New York. We know we want to address food. Maybe there's limited access to it. Maybe it's unhealthy. What resources, skills do we need, right? We might need to know how to build the store. We might need to have access to farming community. We might need to access logistics and delivery. And who wants to work with us on this? Who will be our members and our broader ecosystem, our network of neighbors who are going to help us, who are going to cooperate with us to deliver this? So this is where a lot of relationships come in, right? Thinking about your mission, thinking about your goals, thinking about who you're going to partner with or cooperate with. Now we're looking at the business model, right? Who are we delivering value to? How are we delivering value to them? What value are we delivering, and how will we actually become better off for it? So this is about your value proposition, right? What value are you proposing to offer to your community, to the customers who has this problem? And so you have to make sure you have a desirable product, right? What is the desirability of your product or service, right? They have to want it, right? It has to be feasible to deliver. You have to be able to make those hot dogs, to create that grocery store, to deliver the food to this community, to, offer those massages, to do whatever it is, right? And it has to be viable. It has to work over the long term. It has to not only cover the costs of the business, it has to generate some type of surplus or profit so that you can continue to reinvest in the company or to pay back your loan. So how do you determine desirability, assess feasibility, increase viability? That's playing with that value proposition. That's playing with who are our customers? How do we deliver our service to them? What's the best way to do so? And why does this work? Why are they willing to pay money for this product or service? And why does it actually make sense for us, meaning we have enough of a surplus or profit margin to keep this thing going, right? So again, more social capital here, human capital. You need that expertise, those experiences to know what's desirable in the community and what's going to work, right? So we're dealing with this human and social capital, both of which might cost you money, but it might not. Next, we're dealing with bylaws and incorporation, right? This is where we're trying to interact with the government to become a recognized entity. So it's time to exist legally, right? It's time to develop your organizing documents, whether those are, if you're a corporation, your bylaws, or, a different type of business, LLC, and you have a partner agreement or different types of operating agreements. It's time to identify your board members. Maybe you start off with an initial crew, a steering committee to get things started, to get this to a point where we can decide to actually incorporate or not, right? To develop the idea enough so that we can actually get incorporated. These are those initial risk takers, those board members who are going to help to guide this ship. Now you file your articles of incorporations and you adopt your bylaws. What are the ways that we're actually going to get ourselves organized and recognized by the government? What are the rules that we're going to hold ourselves accountable to? And our bank account. So now we're dealing with the business capital, right? We need legal expertise, accounting expertise, and we need our own set of skills internally as well. And now you're dealing with more business capital, right? So not only do you need to get legal expertise to incorporate and to make sure you're following the law, you also need accounting expertise, but you might need marketing and sales expertise, right? You need to get your business to a point where it can grow. It can sell its business, its product or service to the intended customer and continue to grow, right? So we're asking ourselves, what expertise do we need? Do we need digital expertise to put up a website and create a sales funnel? Do we need social media marketing expertise? What business plan expertise do we need to grow this business, right? Now we're developing a business plan. Maybe you visit a technical assistance provider, you call up Johan, you come in and you sit down, create your business plan, right? Maybe your performers, which are your financial statements, projecting out into the future, how you think the business will do, and your budget, your plan for spending your money, right? So business capital. And finally, we're dealing with financing, with financial capital, right? So how do we get started or grow our enterprise, right? So how do we know if we're ready to approach lenders, and what costs do we need them to help us support? So we need a list of these expenses. We need to start imagining ourselves on day one. We need to create a grocery list or a shopping list, or go window shopping and start calculating those costs, make a list of them. Now we know what we need to get started. Or if we want to expand our store, we do the same thing, right? What are those hard costs for day one, or for the day 100 when we're expanding, that we're looking for financing? What are those costs? Are they clear to us? Have we went window shopping to get a sense and estimates as to how much that's going to actually cost us, so our lenders or our investors know how much they're going to be investing? Maybe you already have donations and grants. That's a part of the mix here, right? You reach out to folks who care about this to support you, and perhaps you're expanding. It's going to be a similar process, right? What do we need to expand? We go shopping, we make a list, and we need to know what other supports we can have in addition to borrowing money or receiving an equity investment. And so we're going to talk a lot more about these different types of financial capital, but we want you guys to think beyond just money when it comes to capital. You know, capital is something that's going to help your business to get started and grow. Resources or assets you need in the delivery of your service or product, but you know, it's more than money. And maybe all of it you can purchase with money, but there are other ways to help your business access capital, because there's different types of capital. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Carolyn, who's going to speak to the different sources of capital.
All right, so what are the different sources of capital? These sort of map onto the phases in growth. So, the earlier you are in your development process, the more risk averse you're likely to be, right? And the more risk averse anybody who's looking to engage with you about capital is likely to be, because, when you're in that early stage of just getting your group together, there's not much there. You might not be ready to invest a lot. So initially in that early phase, you're looking at what are the owners or that steering committee or that board ready to invest. Might be some of your own money, might be mostly your time, and sort of that sweat equity. As you start to work on feasibility in your business model, you say, okay, like here's our proposed concept, here's what we're out to do, and you can start to see that and talk about that and get other people excited about it. This is where donations and crowdfunding can be really appropriate, because you are asking people to support the idea so that you can test it out. And even if you decide, oh, actually, we want to go in a different direction, you don't have to pay anything back. You got some donations. People were excited to support something they thought was a good idea. And everybody can walk away and change direction if you decide you want to pursue something different. The other thing that's really good about doing sort of donations and crowdfunding early is, you see here, we've got both fundraising, but also friend raising. Friend raising is not a term that we use very often, but it's this idea that when you go to the crowd with your idea, you're able to test your value proposition. You're able to say, who's interested in this? What can I tell you about it that'll make you excited? You can sort of hone your marketing messages, develop some of your early marketing collateral, and get people started spreading the word, so that when it's time to go after additional money, or even just to open your doors, you know who's going to be coming in. When you decide, okay, we have a business idea, we've tested it, it's feasible, we think that we're ready to make it official. This is where sometimes you can start going after grants. So when you have an entity, or you have a fiscal sponsor, that, a nonprofit that's willing to support you and lend their name to your project, you can go after some grants, whether that's from your local municipality, from a foundation that's interested in supporting you, whatever. And that can often help you with some of those early soft costs of putting a good plan together, putting your marketing materials together so that you're ready to raise additional capital and open your doors. As you are putting your plan on paper, starting to develop financial projections, writing a business plan, writing a marketing plan, that's when you might be ready to get some real investment. Again, going back to your crowd first. And this might take the form of like doing a pre-sale, doing some sort of a Kickstarter that's got some sort of a reward related to, we'll give you a gift card or whatever after we open. It might also be the place where if you have members who are in a position to put more equity in, they could do that in the form of a member loan. So a lot of the times when we're setting a buy-in fee for a co-op, we want to keep the entry cost pretty low for everybody so it can be accessible to the widest variety of members. And members might have different levels of sort of access to finances. And so this is where member loans can come in. If you have some people who can put in a little bit more, they can do that as a member loan, but everybody's ownership stake remains equal. It's not like in a partnership where the people who own more shares get more votes. No, in a co-op, one member, one share, one vote, everybody's equal. And financial investment is something that's extra based on your ability and your willingness to sacrifice that for the co-op. And then finally, this last phase is really debt. Institutional debt becomes appropriate when you've got revenue to repay the debt. So that's really sort of this last stage of when the business is launching that you might want a loan to have working capital to be able to, pay yourselves until you're producing revenue regularly. So again, just the overview is when you're starting up, more risk, more investment from, your members and your crowd. And as you move to having more of a stable business external from just your members and your idea, that becomes something you can take out into the world and get financing for. This is just a different view of those same types of financing. So basically, the four big buckets are donations and grants, crowdfunding, equity, and debt. And these are some, examples of different places that, or different names you may have seen associated with these. We'll go through these one at a time. So donations and grants, this is money that you don't have to pay back, which is awesome. The unawesome part is this is taxable income to your business. So you want to understand, if you're in operations, understand the impact, talk to your accountant, understand if you got to pay taxes on this stuff. The other it's not that it's not so awesome, but the other thing to remember is grants usually comes with some requirements. So whoever's giving you the grant probably will want some reporting, want to know that, they have a mission, they're granting to you based on fulfilling that mission. They'll want to know how it helped do the thing that you said that your co-op is intended to do. Some grants might need fiscal sponsorship, which is a fancy way of saying, we don't exist as an entity that the grant maker is willing to fund, either because we're not a nonprofit or we're not even an entity yet. So fiscal sponsorship is a way to have a nonprofit sort of take responsibility for the reporting parts of the grant and say, yes, we'll make sure to hold the funds. We have a bank account. We have financial reporting capabilities. We'll hold the funds from the grant maker, and then we'll disperse the funds to the co-op, and we'll make sure that the grant maker gets what they need to satisfy their reporting requirements. And there are a variety of different nonprofits that do that specifically for co-ops as part of their mission. And then another thing that you can do is there are a lot of different types of online platforms that can help you manage the record keeping aspect of donations and both receiving the funds and letting people, donate with a click of a button rather than with a check, and also making sure that they're tracked and acknowledged when they do that. Hot tip is that these platforms aren't in it for the love of it. They are doing it because they get a fee, and most platforms have a back end by which you can get people to send you checks, and you can still acknowledge them and enter them into the platform without it taking that fee that it's going to take if somebody wants to process a credit card. And I guess the last thing to say about donations and grants is that you know this is usually going to bring in smaller amounts of money. So yes, I'm a big believer in, I love asking people for money with other, boards that I'm on and stuff. I'm a big believer in donations and the power of donations, but if you're thinking about actually launching a business, grants and donations are going to be probably supplemental. They're going to be the things that sort of help you prime the pump, but they're not the thing to count on for ongoing, you know, operating expenses. This is not how you're going to pay the bills once you get up and running, hopefully. Okay, next, rewards-based crowdfunding. So, examples of this are like Kickstarter and things like that, where, it says, if you donate $25, we're going to give you a sticker. If you donate $100, we're going to give you a t-shirt. And on the one hand, people are giving you donations, but you're upping the ante a little bit because you're going to give them something back in return. So there is potentially a little cost. I mean, some of the rewards can be things that are intangible, which is ideal, but you still have to, like, whatever, send them the handwritten note or the crocheted tea cozy or whatever you said you were going to do for them. So, think about, do you have the wherewithal, if you're going to do something rewards based rather than just asking for donations, do you have the wherewithal to actually fulfill that? Because otherwise you're damaging your brand before you even started by setting up an expectation that you don't then fulfill. So rewards based can be really good when you're actually thinking about launching and you want to start building that mailing list, building that list of fans, getting your merch out there into the world, because then it becomes kind of a marketing expense in a way. Pre-sales can be another good part of the strategy. So if you know that, okay, we're opening in 2 months and we really want to make sure that we have people coming in the door regularly, just so that people in the neighborhood see that we've got foot traffic, people are sitting at the counter, people are coming into the store. Pre-sales can be a good way to do that. So this is saying, basically, give us $100 now, we'll give you a $50 credit to use in the store when you come in, or how you structure it, however you want to structure it. The thing to remember with pre-sales is that at some point you got to provide your good or service, and if they're paying you up front for it, they're not paying you when they come in. So just making sure that you account for that in your planning. But it can be good when you're trying, if you have a storefront business where you're trying to demonstrate to people, hey, we're up, we're opening, we're busy, people like us, creating some buzz. This can be a good way to do it. When you're looking at different platforms and deciding, is it Kickstarter, is it Indiegogo, is it whatever, remember that, read the fine print. Some of these platforms are all or nothing, which means you say, we have to raise $50,000. And if we don't hit $50,000, we don't get anything. And others are sort of earn as you go. So anything that's donated counts toward your campaign. I think I talked a little bit already about, crowdfunding can be a good way to test your marketing messages, a good way to build your crowd, build your followers and your eventual customers. And also it's a good way to sort of market test how many people want what we have. So with consumer co-ops, like with food co-ops, a lot of the time, the developers will want to see a certain threshold for how many people are signed up as members, both because there's a little bit of capital that comes from those members, but mainly because people who sign up as members are likely to be shoppers. So that's a good way to test and see, are we going to have enough foot traffic to be able to support whatever our plan is for sales. And the last piece of fine print is, depending on what state you're in, some states, want it. Well, let me just back up. Let me just say, for simplification, that your rewards shouldn't have like a lot of tangible value. It's better if they're like pretty low value, because there's a point at which it becomes a return on investment, and that becomes a whole other thing. So yeah. Next is equity-based crowdfunding. A lot of the same stuff as with rewards-based, except that you actually have to pay this money back. So assuming that you're profitable, equity means you're giving somebody a little stake in the business, and when the business is profitable, you're going to pay them something for it. This is where you're getting into securities law. So usually you don't want to do this unless you're working with a professional who specializes in this, because you will need to file and make sure that you understand all of the ins and outs of equity-based crowdfunding. Because there's some cost associated with it, this is why it's one of those sort of later in the stage of development sources of funding. And a good strategy can be to use your donation-based fundraising to cover the expenses. If you know you want to do an equity raise, actually use some of those donations to cover the cost of registering with the platform, working with the lawyer, doing your promotional materials, etc. And I guess, the other thing to say about equity-based crowdfunding from a values perspective is that this is a good way to expand the upside of your business to your community. So if you really believe in what you're doing and you think this is a good wealth building opportunity for your worker owners, for your members, maybe it is an investment opportunity that you want to offer to other people in your community. So this, potentially, if you really believe in what you're doing, can be a way to let other people also profit, who, maybe they can't be a member, but they can support the business in other ways and profit from that. And lastly is vanilla debts. So this is probably the source of funding that people are most familiar with. You want to go buy a car, you want to buy a house, whatever, you want to go to college, you're going to take out a loan. So this is money that you have to pay back, and usually you have to pay it back over a specific amount of time, and usually you're going to get charged some interest. This is where understanding the loan terms is really important, because there will be, a time period over which you're paying it back. There will be a percent interest. That percent interest might stay the same, or it might vary. So understand what that is, so you're not surprised. There might be other fees, so understand what those are, so you're not surprised. And this is where, all debt's not created equal. So if you're working with a co-op friendly lender, we're out for you to succeed. We're out for the co-op movement to succeed. We know that when co-op businesses fail, that hurts everybody. So we're really trying to provide debt in a way that's very transparent and predictable, and that a co-op can afford to pay. Our process takes longer, and Joe will talk about this a little bit later. But the difference is, if you go to an online peer-to-peer lender and they say, yeah, we can get you a loan in less than 24 hours, and you click the button, the amount that you're going to be paying will not be transparent. It will not be fair. It will likely be extractive. So it's really important to understand that even when you get to the point that you say, yes, we have a business plan, we have financial projections, we're producing revenue, we can pay debt, remember to read the fine print, because not all debt is created equal, and you know, your lender should be somebody who's your partner and who wants you to succeed. Okay, scary stuff. More scary stuff. Lenders will usually want something to secure that debt. So they want to know that if your business doesn't succeed, they'll still get paid back. So that might look like collateral. So if you're using that loan to purchase a building, that building will serve as collateral because it has value. If you're not able to pay the lender back, worst case scenario is that that building could be sold and that could be used to pay them back. If you have equipment, same thing. We will get more flexible about what can count as collateral than some people will, but the most secure form of collateral is something tangible that could be sold. Some lenders will want personal guarantees. That's not the best fit for a co-op because, say, you've got people and the members in the co-op who have different levels of wealth. Maybe some people have a house, or some people have some assets that they could use to provide a partial guarantee. Other people don't. Everybody has an equal share in the decision making about how you're spending your money and how you're earning money. So it's not really fair to say this person's house is going to be on the line, this person's personal assets are going to be on the line. So, this is part of why cooperative loan funds exist, is to make sure that we're aligned. We're not saying we require a personal guarantee from only certain members, but instead we're looking at what are the business's assets? How are you running the business? Do we have a good, trusting, good communicative relationship, and underwriting based on that? Loans that are not secured, a lot of the times you can get loans from your members, from friends and family, even from community members or customers that are not going to ask you for a guarantee or any collateral. They're going to say, I believe in you. You've explained this to me. I think you're a good bet. Pay me back. And they might even be more flexible about what interest rate you're paying back for. But it is still a loan. Even if they're not going to come after you if you don't pay it back, it is your reputation, it is your brand. You don't want to hurt your friends. So just remember that those are still forms of debt, but they may be more accessible, especially early on, than going to a bank or a CDFI lender. And the last thing on here is sort of an edge case, which is Kiva, and I bet there are probably some other services like this, does zero interest loans that are crowdfunded that you have to pay back, and they're basically looking for social proof. So they'll say you have a month in which to raise your goal. You're going to raise it through crowdfunding, but before we launch your campaign live, we're going to ask you to go to your friends and family and get them to make loans for a certain percentage of that to show that you're a good risk. Because if you have friends and family in a crowd who are willing to take a risk on you, then we're willing to put it on our platform and ask other unrelated people to take a risk on you. So that's how Kiva works. And that can be good, before, if you're testing the waters, and you need a small amount of debt, that can be a good starting point. And then lastly, so what does this look like in practice? You've got you kind of a cocktail here of debt and equity and grants and donations. What does this look like in practice? So this is 3 hypothetical examples. We've got a restaurant startup, and let's say they needed $1 million. They had 20 members, but they're a restaurant. Nobody's making big bucks, so their share price is only $1,000. So they've got a little sliver of, in that dark blue, $20,000 of member equity. They're able to get a grant because there's some good community development organization in their city that believes in them. They're able to get a grant. They're able to get some community loans because people in their neighborhood believe in them and love them and want a good space in their community where everybody can feel safe and happy to go and eat and drink together. So they get some community loans. And then, they've gotten, what is that, 60% or 40% maybe of their financial need raised through their own local community and their own resources. And then they can go to a CDFI lender, a co-op friendly lender, and get the other 60-ish%. In contrast, let's say you have a business that wants to convert. Let's say you have a design firm that has 35 people working there. It's a successful firm. Maybe they've been around for 20 years. They make a few $1 million in revenue every year. They're doing good. They know that they can pay some debt. Their owner's getting ready to retire. And he says, I'm going to sell the business to you. You form a worker co-op, buy the business from me. I believe in the business. I've been running it for 20 years. It's successful. You guys have helped me build it. I know you can run it and do a great job, and you'll pay me back. So I'm going to give you a seller's note. I'm going to give you a loan for almost half of what you need to buy the business from me. You can pay me back over time over the next, 15 years. Then all of the members say, we really believe in this and we've been earning good money from this. So we're each going to buy a $10,000 share. And that's good for, another almost half of the purchase price. And then with that, they can say, okay, we're going to use this money to buy the business. We've got a patient loan from the seller, and we're just going to need some working capital to cover payroll and fluctuations between like when we do the work and when our customers pay us. And so they might come to a lender for like $100,000 working capital line of credit. So it's a much smaller sliver, and they've been able to put together a lot more of the money themselves. And then this last example is, let's say that you have a group of folks who want to provide affordable group equity housing. So they're going to buy a house that has a bunch of bedrooms. They're going to live together in a really cooperative, like if you think about a housing co-op, this is it. They're all going to have their own bedrooms, but they're going to have a shared kitchen, and they're going to have community meals once a week. And their main goal is to have people have stable, affordable place to live where they can have community and feel safe at home and know that they can afford it. So they have 10 members who want to buy this house together. Each of them can put in $500 because remember, this is about affordability. They're able to get a grant for some of it. They're able to get some community members to put in money to support some of it. And the majority, they're going to come to a cooperative lender to lend them the money to purchase the house. And because they have this big old physical asset that counts as collateral, and they're able to borrow a larger amount. So it's really different than a business where most of the value is in the ability of the business to produce its goods and services. There's maybe not as much tangible in that restaurant or the design firm to guarantee that loan. It's more speculative for the lender, and that's why both of those business examples needed to really do more work to build up some of the capital through equity and through donations and grants before coming to a lender. So those are some examples of how this works in practice and how we can sort of make our cocktail of capital so that it works for different types of co-ops and different types of businesses. And now I'm going to hand it off to Joe to talk about what capital providers are looking for.
Great. Thank you, Carolyn. Let's just also pause to say, like, we welcome questions to be put into the chat. We'll have an opportunity at the end to talk more. But if you have things you want to put in now, we have a moment to do it, so we can reflect back on what you've heard from Johan or from Carolyn as I get my screen up here. And I want to reflect back sort of what I'm hearing from the first portion of the presentation too. CFNE is primarily offers debt, financial capital. As Johan has really emphasized, like financial capital is not the only kind of capital. If you're starting out, think about other kinds of capital that you can be looking for. If you are thinking about financial capital, Carolyn has emphasized, like, debt is not the only form of financial capital. You can think about equity and crowdfunding and all these other things. So in some ways, the message you might be getting is like, uh, do you really need CFNE's debt? But I think that as the examples that Carolyn just showed as well, sometimes the blend of capital is really what makes the business succeed. So even if you come for us for debt, it could be really advantageous to have had donations, to have had grants, to have member equity, and certainly to have all the kinds of non-financial capital that Johan mentioned. So, um, but let's see. I'm not sure I can see the chat, but are there any questions that people want to bring out right now?
So Jerry asks a good question, which is the 20,000 plus costs for legal and marketing based on current costs? So that's referring to the cost to do an equity raise. No, that number is probably a few years old, so heavy on the plus part. But I mean, the important thing is that equity or any sort of equity raise or debt crowdfunding too is going to be something where you're putting in some substantial money on the front end in order to raise that money. In order to comply with legal requirements and to make sure that you bring in the amount of money that you need.
Thanks, Carolyn. Any other questions that people will have on their brains before they, that they don't want to lose in the continuing conversation about things that Johan or Carolyn have mentioned? Okay, well, feel free to drop things in the chat as you go, and we can try to field them. And then, like we said, we'll have some time at the end to kind of open it up for dialogue and conversation. So this next section, is about what capital providers are looking for. So I think that the first two sections are really kind of from your perspective. This one is a little bit from our perspective, from what we offer debt financing. I'm an underwriter. I never kind of thought I would be an underwriter in my life. It sounds like a pro wrestling villain a little bit to me. But the perspective that we are looking at the applications we get from is very opaque to a lot of people. And I remember when I started my career, I was a baker at a worker cooperative bakery out in California, and I applied for a loan. I had no idea the um, what the bank was looking for. I thought, and the questions I was asking was like, do they want me to staple my package like parallel to the paper or diagonally, like as if this would really matter. I didn't know what they would be interested in. So what I'm going to try to do in the next section of the presentation is peel back uh, the veil a little bit and show you like what we're actually looking for in these applications so that you can think about um, uh, how to present them to us in a way that like helps us read them and then helps us, approve them if all goes well. So Carolyn did a really good job on mentioning this, but we're not the only kind of financial capital that you can offer or you can look for. Commercial banks are a source. CDFIs like us, community development financial institutions, are a source. Foundations, your own networks, even you might be providing the money. So just to ask a little bit, like, well, what are these different sources looking for? And Carolyn touched on this a little bit. Commercial banks, bless their hearts, they're looking for profit, and so this really changes their behavior. They want very safe loans, so they will not necessarily need to get to know you very well to decide whether your loan is a safe loan or not. They will generally look at your credit score. Have you paid back your credit cards? They'll want to know, can they take your house if you mess up? They want to make sure that they're very, very safe. Historically, commercial banks have a negative history of judging the safety of their loans based on racial and gender discriminatory kind of ways of looking at things. There are, and then there's these new kind of like bank adjacent things like Carolyn mentioned that like these 24-hour loan sites or that are doing who knows what to decide whether this is safe. Maybe maybe they're using AI at this point. Maybe I would apply for these and they would say, oh, Joe Marafino sounds Italian American. Do Italian Americans in New York tend to pay back their loans? Posts a lot of pictures of moss on Instagram. Do people who post pictures of moss tend, who knows what they're doing? But they're not necessarily trying to converse with you and understand you. CDFIs are a bit different. Their goal is to have a social impact. And so they're really going to ask a lot more questions and try to get to know you. And they're probably willing to take a little bit more risk if they feel like the outcome could be positive for their social mission. So they where the commercial bank safety is kind of like the most important thing for the CDFIs. Impact can be an important thing, and some degree of safety, but there's tends to be a little bit more risk appetite in the CDFIs like us, where if not everything is secure, but it seems like it could do good in the world. Well, we'll try to say yes to it. Foundations are all about social impact. But as Carolyn mentioned, that money's not necessarily free. They want you to do work. They want you to report on what you're up to. They have to prove that they've done something good. So there's a lot of data collection. They're probably going to want to like take your story and tell your story, and you may or may not want your story told by foundations. You can make that choice. Your networks, crowdfunding, tend to want to participate with you on some sort of journey. Could be like an adventure of starting a business. It could be something kind of innovative. They may care less about being paid back, but they want to be part of it. So the thing that you often have to provide to those capital providers, if they're your networks, is like helping them experience the process that you're going through, sending regular email updates about what's going on. And then lastly, there's you. Like, what the good question is to ask you: if you were to invest in yourself, if you were to put your own money towards your project, what are you looking for? Do you lean towards wanting to be very safe? Do you lean towards like wanting to do something good in the world? Are you trying to be part of something exciting? And everyone can make that decision for themselves. But a lot of people are like quite conservative about their own money, and I think that can be a way to help experience it from the lender's perspective too. If you're not willing to put your own money in, like why would a bank want to? So and the reverse, if you are willing to put some of your own money in, if your friends and family are, and if your community is, that's a really strong signal to CDFIs and to banks that something positive is happening, and they might want to participate as well. So I'm going to talk mostly about this tool that many underwriters use called the 5 C's. So underwriting is assessing risk. Basically, it's trying to figure out, how risky would this loan be? All the loans have risk. We don't know the future. Every business is a like a hypothesis that it could turn out well or might not turn out well. There are things that are out of our control. And for us, we're looking at it and saying, we have some risk appetite. We're willing to stomach a little bit of risk, but we kind of like want to know where is that risk located? And if there's too much, we might say, not yet. Could you go back and try to like mitigate this risk for us in some way, like, and then see if you can apply again. So this tool called the 5 C's has 5 words that start with C. And the first 3 are pretty similar to other small business lenders for us. So the first one's capacity, which is like, will there be enough cash flow to pay back the loan? So loans cost money. There's interest every month. You got to pay it back. So the approach that we ask to this question is sort of like, if the plan goes well, will you be able to pay it back? So I saw in the news, for example, today in the Washington, D.C. Botanical Garden, there's a flower that has bloomed, the corpse flower, that smells like a dead body. So let's say that your business were to sell tickets for people to come smell the corpse flower, which people like to do, I guess. We might say, okay, you've convinced us that there's a market for this, that some people want to come smell the corpse flower, but it only blooms every 3 to 7 years, so even if your plan goes well, will you be able to pay back the monthly debt service? Or, and if you're only selling tickets every 3 to 7 years, even if you've convinced us that like this is an exciting idea, it may be that there isn't enough cash flow for you to pay it back, so that there isn't capacity for that to happen. Then there's collateral, and the collateral is sort of the negative side. If things go badly, what can we do to be repaid? And this one's quite contentious, in the nonprofit space, and because let's say you're an affordable housing lender, your mission is to support housing. You really wouldn't want to liquidate someone's house to be repaid. So even though there's a lot of collateral in housing, the idea that you would claim that back and resell it is, it's fraught for a mission. And that's true for us as well. But we do look at it and say, worst case scenario, if something goes bad, are there assets that could be liquidated that we could be repaid? And we have been in this position where a business, we've helped them buy a building, and the business didn't work out, and so they're going to sell the building, and that will be what repays our loan. Then there's conditions, and this is sort of one that's more art than science. It's sort of like what's happening in the world that's out of your control. A good example for loans that come to us is like the booksellers. So we get a fair amount of applications of people who want to start cooperative bookstores, and it's an adverse market right now for book selling. There's the internet sales are eating away at all of the local independent bookstores. So the conditions are like troubling. On the same time, that it could be that adverse conditions is exactly where we need to be as a nonprofit mission-oriented lender. That if there's a situation like low-income housing where it could be an adverse market, it may be that's where we need to step in and fill a gap because banks aren't going to do it. So adverse conditions can both be something that we see risk in and also something that we see social benefit in. So there's two of the C's, and I'm going to go into detail on these, all a little bit later, that we look at a little bit differently than a traditional small business lender. Character. So a bank may just look at your credit score and say that is your character. You pay your credit cards on time. You must be a good person. We look at it a little bit differently. We don't look at credit scores, and we don't look at individuals really. We're trying to understand the nature of the group. So character is really about is there like a functional board that can get things done, that can work through difficult issues, that communicates well. We're looking at the character of a kind of collectivity rather than an individual, which is different than what banks would do. And then there's capital, which is this question of like, how much are you putting in? Are you sharing in the economic risk? And we do look to see like how much are members putting in. But it's a little bit different than what banks would do, where they might say, you need to put 20% down. We might say, it could be a little bit more nebulous than that. What we want to know is that you're putting a like significant amount down, a meaningful amount down, and that everybody's participating by contributing something. So we have more flexibility than a bank or a commercial lender might do. Okay, so I'm gonna I'll say just a few more things about these 5 C's, and then I'm gonna like dig in a little bit. And just fair warning, there are some numbers coming there in the future. So if you are like a number phobic people, it will last for about 3 slides, and then we'll get back to some bullet point language, etc. But with capacity, I think the interesting thing is that this question, like, is there enough cash flow to repay? This changes over time. So it may be that there's not enough capacity at the beginning, but if you do well, there will be in the future. And so that we have to kind of like look at that change over time and understand it. We get a fair amount of applications for worker cooperatives that are buying out the business, and there was capacity in the past to repay a loan, and we have to ask, well, in the new entity, if the owner retires, does that change things enough that there like won't be capacity in the future? And then in some deal structures, we don't want to like take all of the cash flow ourselves, because there can be a real positive to have some left over for the members, so that they experience that sweetness of profit sharing. For collateral, a kind of interesting situation for us is that it's relatively easy to lend if you do claim personal guarantees. If you say like, just put up your house, put up your car. Well, as long as you got those, we can lend to you. We really don't want to do that. It was mentioned earlier, it complicates the democracy of the group if one person is putting up their assets rather than the whole cooperative. So we avoid that. But that sometimes means there's kind of less collateral available. And then also we need to look at the collateral in a way that, if we did liquidate it, what would it really be worth? So, for example, a food co-op might say, if we go out of business, you can take all of our bulk oats and you can resell those. And we might say, well, yeah, you've bought those oats at a certain price, but if we had to liquidate and resell them, what could we really get for them? What's the discounted value there? And lastly, I mentioned it before, but there's this question of conditions. Sometimes in a kind of risky market, a cooperative can have a strategic advantage. So that's something that we will always want to know. We say, going into some more difficult thing here, what's the special sauce that you have as a cooperative that others might not have? Um, Character I mentioned, governance is really important to us. Uh, a way that we often ask this is, uh, if the going gets tough, like how do people make decisions together? So is there like a demonstrated way in which they are like are bringing difficult issues together and voting on them? Do they get into arguments? Are they able to like live with compromise? And so the question we might ask is like, what's a hard question? What's a hard issue that came to your group already that you've been able to work through? Um, we also want to know that the groups are like connected and willing to ask for help. You know, a red flag to us in applications is if someone claims that they're like smarter than everyone else and that they don't need help. Um, there, every business encounters unexpected things. Most of our applicants are doing things they have never done before. And they will experience bumps in the road. And for us to know that they like know who to turn to at that moment and ask for help and are coachable, if they're willing to receive advice, not necessarily from us, we just want to know from someone. That's the kind of a positive sign to us. Um, for capital, again, just to reiterate, uh, we want to know that we're not the only partner kind of sharing in the financial risk. We're like, if we're putting our money, will you put in a little bit of your money? It doesn't necessarily have to be a lot. Some groups say that this is not a meaningful sign of their commitment. They say, like, look at my lifestyle, look at our relationships, like obviously we're committed. We're not going to walk away from this. Like, why are you asking me to put in some money? Um, it's our view that money, changes the situation, that if you feel like you have something to lose, that you will think more long term. So we want it to be enough money that like you're not going to easily walk away. And the people have different opinions about this. You do not have to put in money to cooperate. Some cooperatives have no investment, but for us to put in our money, we kind of want you to do a little bit. And if there's a theoretical, heritage to this. This is kind of an even Jeffersonian idea that like that democracies work when people have something to lose. But that's why he wanted only landowners to be part of the democracy. So it's fraught in some ways. You don't want it to be something that biases towards the wealthier to be able to participate. But we also want people to say like, oh, it would hurt a little bit to walk away from this. So I'm gonna stick through it and like think for the long term how to make this work. Okay, so we're coming to the numbers. So when we look at capacity, this is a question, can it be paid back? We ask for financial projections. So you got to have someone on your team that can put some numbers together. It doesn't matter the font size or the format, but I'll look at them and I'll try to see like, well, what kind of story is it telling? So here's 4 stories we often see. The one on the top left is like things are going to stay the same. That we are making a certain amount now. We're going to continue to make the certain amount. If the business is doing well, maybe this is a fine story, but we do get applications where people are saying like, we're losing money now, we need a loan, and we're going to continue to lose money. And for us, this is kind of a chin scratcher. Well, if that's so, where's the money going to come from for you to repay this loan? We wouldn't want to put you in an awkward situation of not being able to repay it. Then on the bottom left, we often get the story like things are going to get better and they're going to keep getting better. And this is, that's a great story. It's a story that often shows that like it'll be easy to repay the loan. And we also will, we'll poke at it and say like, what makes you think this is true? We'll look more at the business plan and say like, how is this? Why are the numbers all going up? Is it just rose-colored glasses, or is there something like, is this really likely to happen? On the top right, there's a story of like we're in the Adirondacks. We make all our money during the summer, and then it's kind of like we don't make a lot of money in the other parts of the season. And in this story, it may be that the capacity to repay the loan only happens during like certain portions of the season. And so we'll approach it from trying to understand that, like if you can only repay in the summer and not in the winter, do we have to structure our loan in a way that supports that? Or do you have to have kind of like a nest egg that you can pay in the winter? But it's something I like that people are seasonally aware. And then we'll have to also squint our eyes and say, well, let's not get into trouble where in the winter your payment bounces, and then it's awkward for both of us. And then in the bottom right, sometimes we get plans where people are like, it's chaotic, bro. We don't know what's going to happen. We're doing our best, but we don't have any control. And these are sometimes hard to say yes to. That it's true that some things are chaotic, but it may be that if that is your situation, that other forms of capital are more appropriate to weather the kind of ups and downs. If you feel like you don't have control, to us that means you probably can't predictably repay a loan. So it may be that's not right at this point. So going a little deeper on capacity, here's the wall of numbers. Let's see if I can get a little laser pointer out here. So this is like, from a sophisticated applicant, this tends to be the kind of things we'll see. So if you're new to this and you're wondering like, what are we looking for? This is a good example of like could be a healthy business that's been around for a couple of years, that's doing well, that needs a loan for growth. This is something that they might present to us. So first thing I look at is the income. So it looks like, they got 2 million, whoops, went forward one, $2 million of income now. Over the course of a number of years, they're gonna like double it to 4.3 million. I look at their growth. It looks like they're going to grow 24% in the first year, and then it kind of tapers down. So I think that feels realistic to me. Some people say we're going to grow 50% every year, and that like hockey sticks up in a way that could feel a little unrealistic. Something big is going to happen in that first year that's going to like bring up sales, and then it's going to kind of fade away over time. So what I'll ask is like, well, what's happening that first year? What are you doing that is going to make that kind of big growth moment happen? On the expense side, everything is going up. So salaries and wages are growing, expenses are growing. This feels normal to me when I look at it. So if income is going up, expenses are probably also going up as well. You can't double the amount you sell and not have more personnel costs and other costs. The important thing here is that the expenses are growing at a slower rate than the income. So I'll look down here, and again, this isn't necessarily what they've sent to me. This is my analysis of what they've sent to me. So that you can provide it in whatever format you want. This is me looking at it and saying like, what's going on here? So it looks like as a percentage of sales, their expense is like more than their income to start with. So 115, oops, went forward again. 115% of their revenue goes towards expenses, so they're losing money. But over time, it gets better. As they grow, they kind of, it crosses a moment to being more likely to be able to repay a loan. If you look at the bottom line, you can see that the net income, which is the profit, starts at a loss, then a little bit of a less of a loss, then a little bit of a less of a loss. And then in the fourth year, they break even. And after that, they're profitable. So to me, this is, someone's thought through what's going to happen. They've got, some history that they're learning from. And the big question is like, well, I'm glad you think you're going to grow. Maybe you have a compelling idea that shows why this 24% growth is going to happen in the first year. Maybe you open up and expand your store size, or you open up a new revenue line or whatnot. But what's going to happen in these first few years? Like, how are you going to be able to repay the loan while you're losing all this money for the first 3 years? And that's what I'm going to have to look closer at. So diving in a little bit closer. So net income, which is the profit, is what we've looked at in the past. But there are other things sometimes in the financial sheets that are dragging down the profit that are not actually like leaking cash. The biggest one is depreciation. So for those who, this is a new idea, The idea is that if you, let's say that you buy a truck and you think it's going to last a kind of lifetime of 10 years, but you don't want it all to hit your financial reports in the first year because it'll look like you lost so much money. You can just expense 1/10 of it for 10 years straight. And that way, it hurts you a little bit like every year, but it doesn't have this like huge expense in the first year and then no expense in the rest of the 9 years. So for the life of whatever your equipment is, you can divide it up into little bits and expense it a little bit at a time. But you're actually not spending cash for those second 9 years. It may be that you borrow a loan from us, you buy the truck, and that's the moment when the cash happens. And then after that, there's even though your profit and loss statement says that you're kind of like losing money, you're not actually putting that cash out. So we'll take your net income and then we'll add back in all those non-cash items to say like, what is your cash flow? What's actually happening at your cash level? So that's what's here. We've taken the net income and we've added back some things that are non-cash items. Then we look at what you have to pay. So if you took out a loan from us, in this case, it's a term loan, like it's a loan that's for a certain term of years, certain durations. Then you've got a line of credit, and this is what you're expected to pay per year. Maybe you got a loan from the city that is going to go for 3 years, and then it'll be all paid off. If you're obligated to pay those back, and your cash flow is what it is, can you do it? Is there a debt service coverage? Have you been able to cover your debt service? So in this case, the cash flow is over 200. The debt service is like 100. There's room to spare. There's ample room to spare. So this is good. These are good numbers to us. We say like, really, even if your net income wasn't as good as you think it was going to be, you probably still would be able to cover the debt service. So anything over 1 means you can cover it. Usually we like it to be a little bit higher than 1 in case unexpected things happen. If the debt service coverage ratio over 2, this is positive internal. And I guess, again, this, you don't have to do your debt service coverage ratio on your side. This is something like we're going to be looking at. And if we see something that seems, like it might not work, we'll talk to you about it. And we'll say, it appears as though you won't be able to repay this loan. What do you want to do about that? Do you want to take out a smaller loan? Do you want to think about your business plan? Do you want to look for donations to or grants to cover some portion of this so you don't have to take out a loan? Those kind of questions. All right, the last sheet of numbers, and then we'll get back to talking a little bit more broadly, is about collateral. So this, again, for me, as learning about this at the beginning, it was totally behind the veil. Like, had no idea what people were thinking about. We were at that time, I was trying to start a bakery, and they would ask for like a list of all the assets that were going to be in the bakery, the mixer and and I was like, was the knife an asset, or is are the rags an asset? I didn't know, but here's how we look at it. So here's another example. In this case, this is a mature business. And they have a number of different assets. They've got some real estate. They have some inventory. They have some equipment. And they also have some accounts receivable, which is like promises people have made to pay them, which is an asset on your balance sheet. So we've looked at those numbers. And then we think to ourselves, well, if, heaven forbid, we had to liquidate this company to get repaid. And we don't want to. This is not our mission. Is for you to succeed, not to claim your assets. Could we be repaid back? And we know that if we had to do a sale of the real estate, there would be fees involved. Maybe we would be selling at the wrong season and couldn't wait for just the right moment. So there's a liquidation discount. We think probably we could get maybe 80% of the value of the real estate back. For the other things, we think maybe we could get 50%, And here's where we're kind of like thinking through it. Is the inventory widgets or is it bulk oats? Like which could be sold on the market better? Is the equipment very new or is the equipment old? And so we'll look at, what's the likelihood that we could get the money back? And here we're saying kind of on average of all of the collateral that they have, all the assets, maybe we could get 65% of the value back. Again, we do not want to do this, but so there's a discounted value. And then we look at the amount that the loan is, and we say, is the total amount owed bigger than discounted value of the assets? If it is, here's this ratio, 1.09. We think, okay, this feels like a little bit safe. Now, what if it's not? What if the discounted value is smaller than the loan? What if you really couldn't pay us back if we liquidated? It doesn't stop us from saying yes. But it's something we think about as risk. So if there's like a really great project and everything else looks great, if the capacity to repay is really good and your character is really good and the conditions are really good and everything else is good, and if things went bad, you might not be able to liquidate your assets and repay. It's still possible for us to say yes, but it's something that goes into the calculation. And if it's too low, it may be enough that we come back to you and say, let's figure this out. Let's see if we can adjust things a little bit better to see if if these numbers can look a little bit better to our committee. So real estate is a real interesting one. We make some loans in the Hudson Valley, and sometimes people say, well, our tax assessment is at this number, but it is blowing up right here. This real estate is really worth something else, really worth a higher amount. And it could be true. We need to kind of figure out how we can prove that. So we will, if you can provide evidence of that, that helps us say like, okay, this real estate is actually worth a lot more. Maybe you'll call in an outside valuator to come in and evaluate. Maybe you'll give us newspaper clippings about how things have gone up 150% in the last 2 years and it hasn't hit the tax assessments yet. Maybe you'll show us that the neighbor just sold for like a lot and it's comparable to what you have. So there is some flexibility in this for you to like prove to us that that things are worth a higher amount, and sometimes that can make us feel more secure. Again, welcome comments. Jerry, thanks for coming. Totally understand if you have to leave early. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is character here, I think. So this is the one in which commercial banks tend to look at your credit score, and we're looking for something else. I mentioned it before, but we want to know, when the going gets tough, can your group work through disagreements, work through like hard challenges in your situation? Do you have like a history of kind of overcoming challenges? So as a kind of counter example, sometimes we get people coming in and they say, well, I've got 2 people and we want to start a cooperative, and we'll say, well, 3 is really our minimum. We like to have 3 for a cooperative. That's our standard. We can't lend to 2. And they say, oh, well, I know someone I can bring in to be the third person. So it's a buddy of a buddy of mine, and like let me bring him in, and they'll be the third person. And then we'll be 3, and we'll be a cooperative, And so one question this brings up as kind of a counterexample for governance is like, well, what experience do you have like working with this person? What if they're a real nuisance? What if they don't agree with your vision or your strategy or never show up? It's much easier for us to say yes to a group that's been like working together. Maybe they've put a grant together, so they've co-written a grant. That's like no easy thing. Maybe they've crowdfunded together. Maybe they've been through some hard experience together. There was a group that came to us, and I said, what experience do you have? It was a cafe, and what experience do you have kind of like going through hard times? It was 2021, and they're like, are you joking? Like, did you know what just happened last year? Like we stuck together as a cafe, staying open through like one of the most difficult retail experiences that anyone in recent history has remembered. Like, of course we have character. So there's ways that you can show it that are different than like the board meets regularly and produces notes, etc. Professional supports, I mentioned it before, but we also, we're curious if you joined associations that can help you when times get tough. And I'm looking at the time, so I'm going to skip forward a little bit just to make sure that we have ample time for a few questions if they come out. But We have a loan application process that has information on our website that you can look at. The important things are, we welcome you to get in touch early, even if you're not ready to ask for a loan. We welcome you to get to know us, tell us about your project, even if you're at, at an early stage. We're very happy to talk to you, share what we know, connect you to people. When it comes time to make a loan, we need the documents 30 days before our loan committee makes a decision. So you can't wait till the last minute. We need to visit, and then when the loan committee says yes, if they say yes, there's also a legal process of 30 to 45 days to close. So you can't wait until, you know, 15 days before you need the money to ask. You need to give us time to think through it, to bring it to our committee, for the lawyers to look at it, even after we say yes. So it takes a little bit of time. This is on our website as well. There's kind of a journey of a borrower from discovery to readiness to underwriting to approval and then to the relationship afterwards. And what you will find on our website is this checklist. If it's your first time doing this, it's going to seem like a overwhelming amount of requirements. We want to understand your governance. How do you make decisions together? We want to understand your business plan. Who's your competition? What's your idea? Why do you think this is going to work? Who are you? What's experience do you have? We're going to need some financial projections. We'd like to see, a couple years projected in the future if you can. And if you've got a financial history, that's even better. If we can see your financial history, that helps us say yes. And there's no like one way to do all this. Every financial projection, every business plan we get is a little bit different. Some people think they need to write the great American novel, like 50-page thing. It's really not necessary. Something that's simple and to the point and just kind of lays out your idea is fine. And it's fine if we come back and ask questions about it and say, I didn't see this in your business plan, but I'd like to know more about this. That's not a red flag to us to kind of stay in dialogue with you. So you can find that on our website. There are also many resources to get started on our website. And I think maybe I should stop there and just like open it up for questions and final thoughts from folks if they have them.
Hi. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep. Is that
Hi.
Siobhan?
Hi. Thanks, Joe, and everybody else who was presenting. I wanted to know if you guys offer resources for developing a pro forma. We've had one done in the past, but it was like years ago, and we've since like stepped away from the building that we were looking at. So I'm just trying to gather resources to develop a new one because we are thinking about like scaling down our project a little bit to start. So I was wondering if that's a resource that you offer.
Yeah. And Siobhan, I hope it's okay for me to say I saw in the registration it's a food co-op, right? This is the Kingston Food Co-op. So
Yes.
I'm gonna maybe Johan and Carolyn, could you respond to this because you are on the coaching side of our team? How can we help in supporting people to develop pro forma financial projections?
Johan, you want to take it or me?
Yeah, get in there. Um,
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can support with that. We, can't do it for you, but we can definitely have a conversation about what would go into it and what are the assumptions, what does the format look like and stuff like that. Are y'all already connected with Food Co-op Initiative?
We
See,
are, yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that would be the first place I would point you. But yeah, there's on the slide that schedule an intro call, definitely, or if you're already connected with Joe, we can set up a time to do some coaching around that for sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions or thoughts or experiences people want to share?
well, excellent. I think this will not be your only time Appreciate the question, Shaban, and everyone else. You can reach out to us. We've got our emails on the screen. We've got Carla Torres, our co-op coach. You click that intro call link, you'll be speaking to her. And we're happy to support you on your journey, whether it's a learning journey or a lending journey. So we want to give thanks for everyone who offered their expertise and their time, and for those of you who came to learn from us and to seek out any opportunities that'll be helpful for you. So we should provide a recording of this in about a week. You know, tell your friends and continue to reach out if you need anything. Thank you guys and take care.